In this video, we are going to go over slope. The slope of a line is the ratio of the change in y, what we call the rise, to the change in x, what we call the run, between any 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, on the line. So we have our equation here, slope equals rise over run, otherwise known as change in y over change in x. And the formula we use to find it is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. There are 4 different types of slope. There are positive slopes. Those are lines that rise from the left to the right. There are negative slopes. Those are lines that fall from the left to the right. A slope of 0, that is a horizontal line, and what we call an undefined slope, that is a vertical line. In this video, we are going to go over how to find the slope when we are given a graph, and how to find the slope when we are given 2 points on the line. Let's look at our first example. So we want to find the slope of the line in this graph. We know 2 points on the graph, so we first have to go ahead and find our rise and our run. So to find that, we're going to go ahead and count. So if we stand on this point right here, that I'm marking in red, and we count up to, we want to walk up to get to the other point. We would go up 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So our rise is 4. Our run is how far right or left we need to travel. We would need to go over in the positive direction 1. So our run is a positive 1. So slope is always rise over run. So our slope would be 4 over 1, which we could simplify to just a 4. Let's look at another example. In this graph, we have another line. We have 2 points on the line. We need to find our slope. So we choose a point. I'm going to choose this top one right here, and we're going to count for our rise. How far up or down do we need to travel to get at the same height as our other point? In this case, we would need to go down 1 and 2 spaces. So my rise went in the negative direction, which made it a negative 2. Then we need to calculate or count our run. So how far from where I'm at now do I need to travel in order to get to our next point? I would need to move in the positive direction 1, 2 spaces. So my run is a 2. So our slope is always rise over run. So we put our 2 pieces together and we get a negative 2 over 2, which would simplify to a negative 1 for our slope. Let's look at a third example. We follow the same steps. We need to find our rise and we need to find our run. So if I stand at this point right here, I need to go up 1, 2 spaces. So my rise is a positive 2. And how far would I need to travel to get to the other point? Well, I'd need to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. I went in the positive direction, so my run would be 5. Now I can put together my slope, rise over run. 2/5 would be my slope. Let's look at another example. So in this line, we need to find our rise and our run. If I stand at this point, how far up or down do I need to travel to get at the same height as the point I'm traveling to? I don't have to move up or down, so my rise is 0. Now how far left or right do I need to move? I need to move 1, 2 spaces in the positive direction. So my run is a 2. Our slope is always rise over run, so 0 over 2. 0 divided by anything is always 0, so my slope of this line is 0. Let's look at one more example when we are provided with a graph. Looking at this line, I need to find my rise. If I start at this point right here, how far do I need to travel? I would need to travel up 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 spaces to get to my other point. So my rise is 5. How far left or right would I need to travel? Well, I'm already standing on my point, so I don't have to move left or right. So my run is 0. So my slope, rise over run, would be 5 over 0. You are not allowed to divide by 0, so this makes this an undefined slope. So let's look at some examples when we are not provided the graph, but we are provided 2 points on the line. So here we have 2 points. We have 13, negative 18, and 4, negative 17. And we are asked to find the slope of the line that goes through those 2 points. So we first need to go ahead and label our points. Choose which point we're going to call x1, y1, and which point we're going to call x2, y2. I'm going to go just in order. The first point listed here is 13, negative 18. So this is going to be my x1. And this one would be my y1. The second point, the 4, negative 17, would be my x2 and my y2. So in our formula, we know that the slope is y2 minus y1 over our x2 minus x1. So now that we've labeled which points are what, which one's our first one and which one's our second one, we can simply plug into the formula and do the calculations. So my y2 was negative 17, and then we're going to subtract, because that's what my formula calls for, my y1, which is a negative 18. And then we need to do the same for our x values. So our formula calls for x2, which was 4, and then we're going to subtract our x1, which was 13. So now we can go ahead and do the calculations. A negative 17 minus a negative becomes a plus, so we are looking at a negative 17 plus 18 over a 4 minus 13, which gives us a negative 9. Our negative 17 plus 18 is a 1, so we arrive at our slope of this line is a 1 over negative 9. Let's look at another example. Again, we will be using our formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we need to identify which point is going to be our first point, which point is going to be our second point. Again, it doesn't matter which one. I like to work in order, so I'm going to call this x1 and this guy over here x2. That makes this guy y1 and this guy over here y2. Now that we've labeled our points, we can plug into the formula. So we take our y2, which was 11, and we're going to subtract our y1, which is 0. And all of that goes over our x2, which was negative 15, and we're going to subtract our x1, which is negative 11. In the numerator, we have 11 minus 0, which is 11. And in the denominator, we have minus a negative, which becomes a plus. So we have a negative 15 plus 11, which becomes a negative 4. And we have our slope of this line. Let's look at a third example. Once again, we are trying to find the slope between these 2 points, so we need to use our formula for slope, y2 minus y1, all over x2 minus x1. So again, our first mission, or our first job, is to assign which point is going to be x1, y1, which point is going to be x2, y2. So I'm going to call this guy my x1. That makes this second guy over here our x2, and our y1 and our y2. Now we can plug into our formula. So y2, which is -1, minus our y1 value, which is a -12, all over the top of our x2 value, which is 4, minus our x1 value, which is a -15. A minus a negative right here becomes plus, so -1 plus 12 becomes 11. And again, we have a minus a negative here, which becomes a plus. 4 plus 15 gives us a 19. So we have the slope of our line here. Let's look at another example. So here, again, same formula. We want our y2 minus our y1 all over the top of our x2 minus x1. We need to assign our variables, or assign our x1, x2, y2, y1, both of those. So here is going to be my x1, here is my x2, that makes this guy my y1, and this guy my y2. Your 1s are always together, your 2s are always together when you're naming your points. So we can go ahead and calculate now. Our y2 is -18, minus our y1, which is -17, is all in the numerator. And then we take our x2, -17, and we subtract our x1, also a -17. Now we can go ahead and calculate. So here in the numerator we have minus a negative, that becomes a plus. So -18 plus 17 gives us a -1. And in the denominator we have a minus a negative, that becomes a plus. So -17 plus 17 gives us a 0. We know we are not allowed to divide by 0, so that makes this an undefined slope. So this guy would be a vertical line. Let's look at one last example. We want to find the slope between these 2 points. Following the same steps, we're still going to take our y2 minus our y1, and we're going to divide all of that with our x2 minus x1. Label our points. Here is x1, here is x2, here is y1, and here is y2. Now we can go ahead and calculate our y2, 13, minus our y1, 13, all over the top of our x2, -13, minus our x1, -11. In the numerator we have 13 minus 13, which gives us a 0. All over in our denominator we have a minus a negative, that becomes a plus. So -13 plus 11 gives us a -2. 0 divided by anything is a 0, so we have the slope of this line is 0, making it a horizontal line. So in this video we've gone over how to find your slope when you are given a graph, and how to find your slope when you are given 2 points on the line. Key things to remember are there are 4 types of slope. There are positive slopes, negative slopes, a 0 slope, and a undefined slope. And your key formula is right here, that y2 minus y1 over your x2 minus x1, and it will be used to find the slope anytime you know 2 points on the line. Hopefully this video helped explain how to find slope,